the south of Burlington riverfront redevelopment. The idea is that, well, we're going to go ahead and do it probably, but we want input, we want comments, and I don't know, but this is a kind of an argument that's not made very often, so I recognize that. I think that there's certain kinds of participation that look like they're political and look like they're involved in actual decision making, but they're not. And that art can be deceptive. You go and you think artists represent freedom. No matter what you do, if it's art, somehow, and even if you work with people who are organizing the city to do your art, that somehow that art is always necessarily about political freedom. I don't think that's true. And I think that one might really want to think hard about what public art should be doing and when it is that participation is actually clamping down, this kind of participation, which, yeah, it's not top down, the open gaping hole, but it's actually almost worse. It could appropriate consent, or it could make it look like people are agreeing when there's lots and lots and lots of other social sites and groups of people that don't come to meetings and that need to be in the Penn Mall where it's a big mess, where people can meet and join each other for all kinds of reasons. It's a social site. It's a social site, a place for social groups. And so I think there's different models of what public art is. And I'm concerned that redevelopment across the city might end up expropriating the power, potential power of the artists. And so this is sort of a call to artists in a way, like, wake up. I mean, I'm a critic, right? I'm a cultural critic, that's what I'm trained to do. So that's what I'm doing here. It's not like I'm speaking from top down. It's mainly I'm trying to share with you my research about this city, because there's no one else who really has, I think, sat down and tried to think some of this through. It just seemed that it needed to be raised. And the more I walked by that place, the more I had it was just pressing. It seemed more and more pressing to address it and say something clear about it if possible. So I'm in the English department, the American Studies department here, that's where I teach, and they trained me to think about the social and cultural and political meaning of art. So I've been thinking about it. All right, thanks.
I'd like to suggest that there is some real public art in Iowa City. It's in the Alley Gallery. If any of you have ever walked down Iowa City's alleys, you will see real public art. I've been collecting images, and it's called graffiti. Some of it is marvelous, wonderful. It's done in secret. If they're caught, they're thrown in jail. And yet, the Sotillo mural, he's not going to jail, and he got paid $10,000 to paint on the side of that building. Some of these other artists are wonderful, and the comments they're making are very, very cogent. They're very sharp. They do it in secret. They're anonymous. Sort of. So that's public art too, and it's a part of the hidden part of the city that I'll take you all on a tour sometime if you want to go to the Alley Gallery. That exists as well.
There's a lot of graffiti along Ralston Creek too, but we don't want to turn Ralston Creek or the alleys into galleries.
No, we don't, because then they're dead. That's the end of it. That killed them. Anybody else? Questions? Comments?
I was just ignorant about this, and I don't know if anyone in the room could answer it, but how did we get the mural on the parking ramp? Like, all of a sudden one day I saw it being painted, and maybe I didn't read the paper carefully, but when did that occur, and what was the process? Does anybody know?
It occurred at the end of, I don't have huge amount of detail, but I know it occurred at the end of the summer, and the University Art Museum had a reception for the artist in the Plaza Suites, Hotel Vitro, and wanted to open that artist's production to the public, You only had to pay $5. You could go meet the artist. There's been a lot of support for that mural, and it was the design was not shown to anyone, and that was at the behest of the Moyne Group, which had hired the painter. They didn't want to show the design ahead of time, and they did not, because they didn't have to. It was privately funded, although it was on a city-owned building, so it's kind of complicated, really. And I'm not really sure. I'm not entirely sure. So it's very novel. But I think it also articulates what Moyne himself claims he wants to do, which is support the arts.
Some art.
But yes, the art that he can, but yes, the art that he wants to have a regime of privately supported downtown improvement. And that's really the name of the game, downtown improvement. So it's certain kinds of art.
I guess the question is more about how did the permission get granted from the city or from the public? And so, but again, I guess I wasn't sure what the process is, because my past experience with public art is that there's a committee
That
involved.
I don't know. That I don't know about. I
So
can't answer
was
that.
curious.
The request just went to city council and they gave permission. I do know that one city councilman objected to not knowing what he was voting for. Throgmorton, he said, I won't vote for it until I can see what it is.
He voted in the end, though. I talked to him about that, but yeah.
But he objected. He said,
Yeah.
how can we vote for something we can't see if it's the city and we're
I'll see.
responsible for what's on the wall? How can we just give someone a blank check and
Yeah.
say whatever you want?
Absolutely. I'm sorry I interrupted. Yes, that's absolutely right. He did object. Sorry.
Well, I guess we're done with questions. I appreciate everybody coming today. I hope you'll join us again in December. Let's thank Laura one more time.
Thank you.
Park Lodge is Iowa City's newest facility available to rent for weddings and receptions, meetings, and other events. Located at the Terry Trueblood Recreation Area at 579 McAllister Boulevard, the Park Lodge is a 5,870 square foot facility seating up to 175 occupants. Park Lodge is available year-round, every day of the week from 7 a.m. to midnight. Amenities include tables and chairs, with stove, refrigerator, freezer, and microwave. A gas fireplace is available for use also. The Park Lodge also has a spacious patio overlooking the lake. A lockable green room is available for bridal groups. Restroom facilities are available as well as an area for coats and clothing. The Park Lodge also has LCD projectors and screens and a wireless PA sound system. The Park Lodge is also available for smaller venues and can be rented for events with up to 87 occupants in a 1,390 square foot area. Reservations are taken year-round. For further information about reserving the Park Lodge, contact Tammy Newman at 319-356-5210. You may also find further information on the city's website at www.icgov.org. Look under Parks and Recreation, Park Lodge at TTRA.
I have some pretty simple philosophies in life, and one of the things I say about housing is that everyone needs a place to live, and everyone needs to pay to live in that place. So one of our challenges is how do we get people who are making $30,000 a year into affordable housing? And currently in the Iowa City market, the vacancy rate for rental housing is 0.6%. And a normal healthy market is 5 or 6% vacancy rate because of people moving and whatnot. Because of the student population in this town and the draw for retirees and a moneyed population, the student population in particular, it sort of makes the whole market shift. There's this growing gap between the price of housing, whether it's rental or ownership, and wages. And wages have stagnated and housing prices keep going up. The people that we're talking about are the cashiers, the daycare workers, the teachers, somebody that's working clerical. They're all service workers, but if they're making $25,000 or $30,000, they cannot afford to live here. The basic definition of affordable housing, regardless of your income, whether you're making $10,000 or $100,000, affordable housing definition says you should not pay more than 30% of your wages for housing. So if you're making $10,000, clearly you can't afford almost anything. But somebody's making $30,000, that would be, you know, $9,000 or $10,000 for housing. And if they had to rent a 3-bedroom house, they can't afford it. I'm Executive Director of Iowa Valley Habitat for Humanity. We try to serve Johnson, Cedar, Iowa, and Washington counties. The mission keeps evolving. Essentially, it's safe, decent, and affordable housing. So what that has traditionally meant is that we would build new housing for families under 50% of median income, and we would sell the house. We don't give the houses away, but we sell them at no profit. And the real secret ingredient is with a no-interest loan. So we're both the builder and the banker. And the no-interest loan is what makes it affordable. So our homes, $130,000, $140,000 house will cost about $650 a month. And that includes taxes and insurance. You know, a working family just can't do that any other way. So we have a limited audience we serve. People have to have good credit. They can't have too much debt, which often disqualifies people. But that's our traditional mission, is to do new homes. Lately, we've been doing rehabs. We've been doing ramps to help people stay in their homes. So when I say our mission is safe, decent, and affordable, it could be to get them into that home or to keep them in that home.
One of the things that we are looking at in Iowa City is what do we do to provide affordable housing for people. And the Habitat homes are affordable, and they're ones that the families are also required to do work on. And so they put in a lot of effort in terms of making sure that they're a part of the build. And we appreciate that. It gives us a chance to get to know them, and also seeing their commitment to the community and to making sure that they pay it forward and help others in the future as well. But affordable housing is critical here. We're working with our city council to see what we can do to provide more of it for low-income families, and to make sure that those young families can buy a home and build in Iowa City and be a part of our communities.
There's a crisis in affordable housing in this community. The vacancy rate for affordable rental housing is less than 1%. So it is really, for many families, a fairly catastrophic situation. Stable, affordable, safe, decent housing is fundamental to a family's success. It is fundamental to children's success in school, and we have got a real crisis. This is a serious problem nationally, but a very critical one in this county.
I'm helping with the women's build with the Jean Lloyd Jones home, and we're working on building a house for a family and making sure that they have a good home to live in. Many of the family members are helping us today, and this is the Women in Politics build. And the Friends of Women in Politics. And so we've invited a lot of our friends and women that are in elected offices to come and help us build today.
We're putting up J and F tabs. It's a place for the siding to go into. So up on the ladder tomorrow down in Washington County, We're finishing up a rehab and siding the home of a wonderful Washington County volunteer down there. So it's good stuff.
We've been doing Women's Build for a number of years, and the goal of the Women's Build, other than building a house, is to empower women to take leadership, to find tasks that they thought they could never do and teach them these new skills, and a lot of camaraderie comes out of that. So the Women's Build, we used to just do that, and then I realized one day that if we named a Women's Build after a living woman, two things would happen. She would appreciate it, still being living, and secondly, attention would be drawn from her friends and family and colleagues. So the first year we named it after Dottie Ray, and that brought up a lot of attention. And then subsequently, the last 4 or 5 years, we've named it after other prominent women in the community. And each time it brings a different group, and it widens our base. And I think it creates a network for women that they didn't have before, and it gives them some empowerment.
Women Build is an effort that Habitat puts together. We have a special board of women who raise the funds for these houses, and really the Women Build projects are primarily driven by women. Their message really is women can do anything, and so it's an empowering learning. There are women with hammers out here who are several retired teachers, friends of mine, who do this all the time. It is their sort of volunteer work, and it's an exciting group, and it's so perfect for Jean Lloyd Jones because women's empowerment has really been what her life's work is. So this is a great tribute to somebody who's always focused on women being empowered.
This is the 4th home I've been working on, so this is the 4th year. I've worked with a group called Women with Hammers, and it's a University of Iowa Women's Club group that are advocating women in being more empowered and taking charge and helping do things like this in the community. And so they've been building little free libraries, they've been working on Habitat homes, they've been doing a great deal in terms of, again, giving back to the community, but also being a part of these Habitat homes. And so I'm excited about doing this and glad that I can provide some leadership and some, hopefully, incentive for others to come out and provide that help as well. We look at houses from the outside and see the finished product. We don't know the work that goes on with builders in terms of creating that home. And it's kind of fun to see it from the inside out in terms of setting, just the concrete foundation, and then how the trusses are put in and how you actually build and make a home. So that's an educational opportunity in itself, and something that I think is really valuable and exciting to be a part of.
If we're going to build a house and we're going to be the banker for the family, we want to make sure they pay their mortgage back. Well, one of the ways to do that is to build a highly energy efficient house. So rather than going to the minimum standard that's required by building code for this is the minimum you have to do to insulate, to heating and cooling with this house, we go the next step above. So it costs us an extra $4,000 or $5,000, but it's better and more insulation. It's better ventilation, so they're not going to have to worry about any kind of spores or any kind of allergies. It conserves any heat that would go up the chimney from the water heater or from the furnace is recycled, and we will save that family between 25 and 30% on their heating and cooling bill for the rest of their life. So this is a one-shot opportunity to do it right. And what I say to builders everywhere, and there's reasons why that doesn't happen, is I say, why can't we raise the bar for all new construction and pick the low-hanging fruit and do this better insulation and better heating and cooling and better ventilation so that everybody out there pays 25 or 30% for their heating and cooling. It would save on their utility bills, it would reduce risk to the lenders because the families have more money to pay back. It would burn less fossil fuel, so we don't need as much fossil fuel. It would pollute less. I can drive by the houses we built and know that they're going to be there today, tomorrow, next year. And that's one of the satisfactions I hope that anybody who donates or volunteers with Habitat gets, is that they're not donating to a cause someplace else. They're not donating to a cause that is a black hole where they won't see the results. This is something that they can help with. They can drive by. The family that's going to live there hardly ever moves. Our families hardly ever move because they want it. They're putting their roots down. They're improving the neighborhood. They're improving the community. All of our families pay property taxes just like everybody else. So it's stabilizing neighborhoods and stabilizing communities, and it's a lasting investment. It's not a one-off. It's not like you give the money, you don't see the result. This is something you can drive by every day. And I know that, like Dottie Ray would drive by the house as it was being built, and she drives by it now even after it's built and says, oh, I helped do that. And that, I think that makes people feel good, and it makes them feel like, you know, we all want some sort of legacy or lasting gift for the world. And just helping build, helping contribute to a Habitat house is proof positive you can impact something here in your community by doing just a little bit, but being part of a larger whole that helps. And then above that, we tithe 10% of our giving to third world countries, where Habitat's in 82 countries around the world. So roughly, depending on the country, 10% of the cost of a house here will build a house in Central America. And we have trips that we can help people go on to go build those things. So you're not only building a house in the neighborhood here in Greater Iowa City, you're building a house in Guatemala or Nicaragua at the same time. And you know, it's all one world, so let's help each other out.
If people aren't able to build, we recognize that with the work that's involved here, that may be above and beyond what some people can do. So we also have places where people can donate, because there are lots and lots of opportunities and needs in terms of the build and also with the families. So if people feel like they can't help with building, they can certainly donate and make a contribution to the Habitat home. And again, that just is as important as the building. So we hope people will think about that and offer their services and help in that way as well.
Come to our Restore and either volunteer or shop. The Restore is what I call a Goodwill store of big stuff. So furniture and appliances and cabinets. And the important thing is that we don't even advertise for shoppers in our Restore. We have plenty of shoppers. We advertise for donors. So when people are remodeling their kitchen or their bathroom, don't have your contractor smash the cabinets and haul them to landfill. That's just wasteful. We have to have donors, whether it's the homeowner or the contractor, think of us, take those cabinets, bring them down to us, and we will give them a tax receipt. And then any of the proceeds we make from the Restore sales go back to build more homes. So that's another way to be involved. And of course, we're always looking for sponsors of homes, whether it's a room or a whole house. And we have to be both the builder and the banker. So I have to front the money to build the house. And then when we loan it back to the family, the Habitat family, it's a 20 or 25-year loan. So that money comes back very slowly. All the money that comes back goes to build more houses, but I have to front the $130,000 or $140,000 up front, and that takes a lot of effort and a lot of sponsorship. We have a lot of working families who are being strained right now, and if they pay too much for housing, they're paying 40 or 45% of their income for housing. That means they're not going to pay for transportation or have as much money to pay for transportation or medicine or school clothing or all the other things in life, food. All I would do is ask the public to understand that, we all need a little help every once in a while, and that young family that can't get into housing may benefit from a little less neighborhood opposition next time there's a proposal out there to build new, smaller housing. I think we need to step back and take some time and say, how can I help this young, working, struggling family gain stability? Housing is stability. Housing is related to almost everything else in life. I've learned over 30 years of working in housing, there is nothing that's not tied back to your housing. Your personal security, is it safe? Where your kids go to school, who their friends are, where you shop, how far you have to commute to work, whether you need a second car, Financial stability, my Lord, if you're buying a house as opposed to renting, maybe you can retire someday because you might actually own the house someday and build up some equity. It's the best savings account there is out there. But if you can never get into that ownership, then you can't build financial stability. So I like to say housing is tied back to everything that we touch out there in life.
You're watching City Channel 4. On TV, online, on demand, on Facebook, and now on the go on your mobile device.
Si usted cree que fue discriminado en la materia de vivienda, por favor llame a la Oficina de Derechos Humanos de la ciudad de Iowa City al 319-356-5022.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Iowa City Public Library tonight. This is the first program for the 2001 Intellectual Freedom Festival, in fact, the Carol Spaziani Intellectual Freedom Festival. The Intellectual Freedom Festival began in 1995 when the Iowa City Public Library established the Freedom Festival to honor Carol's 26-year career at the Iowa City Public Library and her lifelong commitment to the freedom of ideas. Carol is still a strong advocate for the public library's role to be a resource and a forum for an individual's pursuit and expression of diverse points of view. The Iowa City Public Library is very pleased to partner with the Johnson County League of Women Voters in presenting tonight's program as the first event in our annual Freedom Festival. And there are several more events coming up, including the October event, which is co-sponsored by the Johnson County League of Women Voters. But we have a special honor tonight in that we have Carol Spaziani, the honoree of the Intellectual Freedom Festival, here to do a brief introduction. Carol.
The reason I'm here is because the president is in New York, and I'm the vice president. So you know my name, and that I'm vice president of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is dedicated to educating voters on topics of importance to our society as well as on ballot issues. We invite you all to join the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. Membership is really open to both men and women and has been for some years, and we urge you to become a member. Membership forms and information are available on the table outside the door. I would now like to introduce the two people responsible for this whole series, Dawn Suter and Rebecca Ryder.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name's Dawn Suter, and I'm one of the co-chairs, along with Rebecca, for this series on the U.S. Constitution and the Supreme Court. So thank you for coming out tonight. It's so great to have this good of a turnout for this kind of event. And it just seems like the Constitution is being talked about more and more in the public and political sphere. And one of my motivations for doing that was just to make sure that when we're talking about it, we really, myself included, really know what we're talking about. So we have two great presenters tonight, and we're really grateful that they're here joining us. And Todd Patterson in particular really kind of helped Rebecca and I get this whole show on the road just by being very generous with his time initially and kind of saying, yeah, talk to this guy about this and this woman about this and this about this. So he really encouraged us that, well, maybe we could in fact pull this off, because there were moments when we weren't quite sure if we could in fact do that. So thank you for that. So this is the first program in our series of 7 on the U.S. Constitution and the Supreme Court. I'm not going to repeat that it's part of the Carol Spaziani Festival, because we've already got that covered.
Okay, are we ready to go? So let's begin our Iowa City Council work session for Tuesday, August the 7th. Our first topic is to consider increasing the salary and benefits for council members effective January the 1st, 2020. And am I right in assuming that no one from staff is going to make a presentation on this? Yeah, so we can just dive right in.
I would call your attention to the late handouts. There were some incorrect numbers in the health insurance scenarios on the second page. Those scenarios in the original packet were monthly costs, and they were represented to be annual costs. So if you have the late handouts available, the annual costs are in those, and I can review them if you don't have them handy. The memo should say, that you're looking at, should say revised in the header. That's the correct one.
Yeah, I didn't have time to see that, so thank you.
You're good.
All right. So, I don't know. Just to get our conversation going, I think this is on our work session agenda because I asked for it during our discussions in the strategic plan sessions. Yeah, in a sense, the topic is a very old and familiar one. The claim often is, and I've made this before and other people have as well, that our salaries are so low that they discourage any people who are not retired and bringing in retirement money or have some other kind of status that are employed and have some, are making adequate income through employment. It discourages other people from even thinking about, well, that's not true. It discourages them from seriously considering running for elected office as a city council member. So my own personal thinking when we had this discussion was that we should consider the possibility of doubling the council members' salaries. And if I do the math correctly, if we doubled the salaries for all 7 council members, including the mayor, who gets about $1,000 more per year, the total cost of the salary increase would be approximately $52,000 per year. Does that sound reasonable, Jeff? I think that's correct. It's like 52, and you double it, it's 104 total, so just 52,000.
Yeah.
So instead of earning only about $7,300, a council member would earn about $14,500. So I don't know if any of you are interested in doubling the salaries of council members or something smaller than doubling. And then the memo that we got from Jeff provides a substantial amount of information concerning health care benefits, health insurance benefits. And they can be pretty costly, but you provided us with information about what it would cost if 100% of the health insurance was covered, or if employees were eligible to get 100% of benefits, or be treated as 3/4 time employees, or be treated as half-time employees, right? All right, so there's information on the table. I wonder if any of you have thoughts that you want to express to begin our conversation.
From the memo that we have, I also want to lay out how much it's going to cost for the benefit. I calculate it will be $117,174 if we consider full-time. 3/4, $94,000, and half-time is $62,000. That's what it costs the city per year.
That's for if all 7 council members receive benefits?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Could you sort of restate that in terms of how much it would cost if all 7 members
if we
signed
consider
up for half-time or 3/4 time or full-time?
If we consider ourselves from the memo that I guess, if we do it like with, I'm doing it with family, not single person. Family, $1,394 per month for each, if we council, if we consider ourselves full-time. The total per year is $117,000. And if it's half-time, 3/4 of time, For family, 94,000. And if it's for half-time employees, it's 62,000.
You and I must have done the math differently. So it'd be helpful maybe to have somebody double check both Maz and me. But I think I calculated if all 7 members signed up, the cost to the city would be between basically $32,000 and $94,000, depending on whether all 4 signed up for half-time or full-time.
That's true if you are signed up as a single person. But if you sign up your family, that's what it costs.
No, well, I think I was taking that into account.
No.
But
what do you think, Jeff?
1 second. Okay,
so while you're
my quick calculations are that Maza here would be her numbers are correct. If you assumed family coverage for all 7 members full-time with the current city contribution, monthly contribution of $1,400 roughly, you're looking at a range of $62,000 to $117,000 per year, depending on how you classify yourself.
Okay, well, apparently I miscalculated. It's okay.
I think using some of the mistaken numbers that we had in the original memo, Mayor.
And by family, you're including actually a family, not just like the member and a spouse.
Yes.
Because some insurance have
our plans don't.
Ratios
our plans are just family or single.
Family.
We don't have a plus type of insurance offering.
So maybe a threshold question is whether we want to just increase salaries for council members across the board, or a separate alternative, just provide this health care benefit possibility for whichever council members want to sign up for it, or combine the two.
Maybe I could jump in here. Can we just offer our comments in terms of how we're individually feeling? Or okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to just break it down into 2 pieces, the wage piece of it and the insurance piece. First of all, in terms of the wage piece of it, I think that the first word that comes to mind is accountability. This would not become effective until a following election, because I think every single council person should be accountable to the voters in terms of what they're paid. Obviously, this would be appointing ourselves a pay raise, so I think that to have that political accountability is extremely important. I know all 6 of us, each and every one of us on this council, feel extremely passionately about removing barriers and opening opportunities, including the ability to take away this seat from each and every one of us. I know that we all feel that strongly, and we want to make sure that each and every member of the city of Iowa City feels that they, if they have the passion and they have the vision and they have the purpose, that a financial barrier should not be present in terms of making that very important decision to serve. I know that we have a lot of boards and commissions in which people are paid nothing. I do know that we also have, the school board, I think it's my understanding by statute, is paid nothing. But that said, for this service, the amount of time that we put in, I think doubling it gets it to a point where it's not going to remove all the barriers. There's some people that may not be able to do that. But I think when you look at the time that we put in, I think this is going to open up the path for people to put their name in the hat to want to serve. And so I think that, I don't know if, I hadn't seen in the actual report how long it's been since there has been an uptick in terms of what the council members are paid, but I think it makes sense to do it at this time.
Long time.
Long time, and I think for the obvious reason, no one wants to be the one to give themselves a raise or identify that as an issue. And I commend the mayor for bringing that up. It's a reality. It's a reality for some people, and I think we don't want a situation where, I know every 6 one of us feel strongly about being not divided by socioeconomic factors, and I think that part of that is ensuring that we have socioeconomic diversity on council itself, and I think this will go some way to allowing us to achieve that. I think as to the insurance, you know, I'm not as dogmatic on that. I do think that we should, right now, I think it's zero contribution from the city. I think the closest analog that we have is that we really are equivalent to like a half-time. It's about 15 to 20 hours a week on average that we put into this job, sometimes more, sometimes less. But I think that that contribution rate at about the half-time level makes the most sense to me. But if anyone has any compelling reasons to the contrary, I'm not dogmatic on that second point.
I differ from Rockne just on that point because, of course, I'm concerned about the financial burden and that some folks might not run because it doesn't offer a lot of extra incentive. But I do feel, especially with healthcare background, that the insurance benefits is the important thing, and not to have a contribution from the city towards someone who is doing their service to the city. I think we're failing that person, and there should be a contribution.
But I'm not advocating zero. Right now, we're zero.
Right.
It would be a contribution level equivalent to a half-time employee.
Yes.
But again, I'm not dogmatic.
But I'm just saying that's important to me. That's more important to me than the financial salary part of it.
I guess from my perspective, the way I've always looked, and I've served on school board where there was no pay, and I look at all of our boards and commissions where there's no pay, and I look at the city council, and to me, it has been people who, and Jim kind of alluded to this, you know, full-time jobs, regardless of income for those full-time jobs. And I think we've got more retirees on here now than maybe we've had in a long, long time. But I don't, with our schedule, you basically are eliminating anybody that works second shift. Okay? Anybody that works second shift in this community can't serve on city council. We have all our meetings at night. Okay? So you've already eliminated anybody that works second shift from possibly participating. I'm concerned about, I see this more as a volunteer type thing that people want to do because they want to serve their community. Should they get enough financial reward out of it so that it does not cost them money out of their own pocket? Most definitely. So if somebody, you know, is having to do child care or other things so they can participate and be a part of this, I totally agree with that. I would be hard-pressed to consider us half-time. Okay? I mean, I spend a lot of time reading our packets and going through our stuff. I go to a lot of outside activities. I sure don't average 15 to 20 hours a week for this work. I would call it more quarter time in terms of what we do. And so, one, I think doubling is too much. A couple of years ago, we at least started indexing it to the Consumer Price Index. I think doubling it is too much. And I think I have no problem with allowing council members some match from the city in terms of the insurance, but I think it should be prorated more on a 0.25% time. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers if that's even a big deal, you know, at the halftime. You probably could prorate that at the halftime, but I don't consider us halftime. So when I look at what somebody could or should be getting to help them offset any financial disadvantage, to look at this as a half-time position for salary purposes at all, I think is excessive. And I guess I would also have the question, because I think in the memo, this talked about this going into effect
after the next election.
But see, then that is, for some of us, voting in a raise for ourselves.
Oh.
Because Mazahir and I are not up for election until 2021. Right. So if this goes into effect before January 1st of 2022, and we vote for this, we are in effect voting for a raise for ourselves.
Yeah, so we could make it effective 2021.
Well, I'm personally not opposed to councilors giving themselves a raise. One question in my mind was, you know, how do the salaries for city councilors for Iowa City compare to other cities? You know, back when Jim mentioned this during our strategic planning, I looked at the salaries for Cedar Rapids, and based on population, our salaries proportionately are lower than they should be. So it seems to me, just like with any kind of labor negotiation, often you bring comparables into the conversation to see, well, how do we compare? And not that that should be the last word, but I think it can serve as a reference that, my gosh, we are sort of out of line here.
Well, Bettendorf is $6,700 for the counselors. $15,000 for the mayor, which they consider, I'm not sure if they consider the mayor full-time, but they have a significant difference between regular council members and their mayor. And I didn't check population. Davenport is $15,000 a year, plus $175 a month for business expenses, which basically they consider partially for a cell phone, so they are always reachable. So I didn't check populations. Those are two that I got hold of today because I was kind of interested in terms of where we are. I figured we were significantly less than Cedar Rapids. I think part of theirs may also be their change from their previous form of government to their current form. They may not have just dropped those salaries because they didn't used to have a city manager. And so my guess is when they made that change, they didn't make the huge drop in council salaries.
So yeah, I mean, it may very well be that doubling, as Jim is suggesting. Jim, I don't know where that figure came from.
What figure?
The doubling that you had suggested, but I think it seems reasonable. Although I would say I would like to see other, the Bettendorf.
I would like to see more. I just didn't have time.
I think having comparisons at least gives us an idea if we're kind of more or less aligned with what other cities are doing. But I think it is important, and I suspect we are way behind. And insofar as if that's the case, then I don't see any problem with giving ourselves a raise. If it's justifiable. And then the same with healthcare. It does seem to me half-time would. I mean, those were the three categories. So that seemed to me to be reasonable without getting into parsing this too carefully.
Just to clarify, the 2020 effective date is a matter of state law. I mean, you could always make it further out than that, but it has to be at least.
I guess for me, I really think about this from I can start telling you how this affect my own life when I get elected. Because increasing, not too much increase, but it could kick you out from public benefit. And for someone like me, a low-wage workers, to encourage them to run, they cannot work two jobs, because if they are, as Susan said, this is an evening job and it takes all our evening. But even though I see it's really necessary, especially the insurance, because since I've been elected, I'm without any insurance. This is, even though this is, I think, it's important, but I'm going to oppose to it. Because I would like first to see my proposal for the seasonal employees, the hour staff, to be increased to $15 an hour before we can think about ourselves. Myself, I'm opposing for this, even though I think I personally need it. But I don't want it now.
I think we would want to have more information about what other cities are doing. I assume the Iowa League of Cities can provide that information pretty easily. That would be helpful to know. Pauline, were you going to say something?
I was just about to say I was surprised to hear Bazi here say that, because I didn't even realize till I'd heard her story how this practice of having not paying towards a council member's health insurance could affect them. She kind of got caught in a catch-22 where she made too much for this but not enough for that, and that was kind of a difficult situation. So I was thinking of you in lines of this, like, we need to do this. So I was kind of surprised to hear your other side of that.
Well, as Maz knows, I understand her concern about the $15 an hour minimum wage and how that's more important for you rather than increasing council salaries. I totally understand that. But we're talking about a much smaller amount of money here, right? If we doubled council members' salaries, that would be, what did I say, $52,000 per year. Whereas the minimum wage proposal amounts to about $900,000 or to $1 million. So they're not directly comparable, but still I see the sort of the principle at stake for you. It's very clear.
So at this point, asking staff to get more information from the other cities?
We definitely want that, yes. I mean, I've already heard that from several other people. So,
would it be difficult to just be the top 10 cities by population?
Yeah, we'll typically take the 10 largest cities, and then we also usually throw in Coralville and North Liberty as just local reference. So if you're good with those 12, we'll pull that together.
If you could find out how they deal with health care benefits for city council members, that would be helpful as well.
Okay.
Would it be helpful to try to find out whether they have increased council members' salaries within the past, I don't know, 10 years? I don't know how easy it would be to get that information, but, and I don't mean just increase, I'm significantly increased.
I think what we can do is if there's some outliers, I think you're going to find most everybody is probably under 20,000. I would suspect that several will be under 10,000. If we find some outliers, maybe we can dig a little bit deeper and see what may be driving that. Otherwise, I think the data will be pretty self-explanatory.
So I'm thinking about if in the end we conclude that a salary increase would be appropriate and that authorizing city council members to be eligible for health care benefits through the city. Being eligible for health care benefits and actually signing up for them means spending a certain amount of one's own money as in terms of the individual's contribution to the health care benefits. And at halftime, the contribution for a family, for a council member with a family, is pretty large. What is it, $700+ per month? Yeah, so if we're going to make council members eligible for health care benefits, it seems to me we must increase the council members' salaries. So then there's some judgment about how much.
It's about $9,000 of insurance cost if you're half-time employee wanting family coverage.
And this, am I correct in understanding that this would be, the health care part of this would be an optional choice for the council members? In other words, they'd be eligible to do it, but then it'd be their choice whether to sign up?
Correct.
Okay, it seems to me we've asked for a few bits of information that would help us kind of move this along. And I don't know that there's anything else we can do at the moment.
We'll come back to you in September and present it.
Okay. Let's see, let me make a note to myself here about this. Okay, I guess we can move on to our next item, which is to consider elevating, oh no, we're not that, we just did that. Oh yeah, to consider elevating hourly staff wages to $15 per hour or more within 2 years. So So, Jeff, you provided us with a memo some time ago about, I don't know, 370 or so of our employees being part-time or seasonal, that is, temporary employees. And you estimated what that would cost, and raised this, the point about what's the, I don't know, salary escalation because the steps would have to be compression.
Yeah.
Do you want to sort of
so this issue came up during your budget discussions earlier this year, probably January, February. Our seasonal positions, or what we call our hourly positions, do fluctuate throughout the year, so we can take a snapshot at any time, but we're going to be at our peak employment in the summer months when the Parks and Rec seasonal staff are in full swing, your lifeguards, your park maintenance folks. So what we did in the memo is give you a snapshot and give you an idea of what we think that will cost. We did consider wage compression for the hourly employees. What we did not take the step of doing is look at any compression issues with our permanent employees. So, for example, if you have a $15 an hour person in one of our departments, and because they're a higher paid hourly employee, if you take a lower paid employee in their same department and move them up to 15, you're going to have to move them up to 16, 17, whatever it may be. And how that impacts the permanent employees, which right now start at, I think, $17.52. We'd have to analyze all that, and that's something that we haven't done. But there would be some compression issues with the lowest pay grades of our permanent staff. So what we did in the memo is we provided some information on what we think the cost will be for raising it to $15 an hour. That assumes you're going to go to 15 from the start. Obviously, if you phase that in, that cost drops and then builds over time as you work towards that 15. We also provided information on the county. They recently moved to $15 per hour for all of their staff, and so we had a question back during budget session about how can the county do this, but the city struggle with that. I think, as the memo indicates, it's just the sheer number of employees that fall into this category. The county does not have that many hourly positions, whereas we are very heavily reliant on that for some of our seasonal operations. We also provided information on the community-wide minimum wage that the county sets. This is obviously voluntary now, thanks to the actions of the state legislature, but they are still adjusting that, and it was recently adjusted to $10.27. And ultimately, that's where our recommendation fell, is that we can index with the county on that $10.27, but certainly that's a decision for you to make. The budget memo from January 17th was also included in your packet, and what I would draw your attention to, if you didn't get a chance to fully get through that, is on page 12 of your packet is a breakdown of the hourly employees that we took at that time. And so you can see that while the police department, city manager's office, neighborhood development services, public works, they all have a few hourly employees, the vast majority of our hourly employees do fall in the Parks and Recreation department. At that time, we reported 242 positions in Parks and Rec, and then there's close to another 50 in the library. So those two departments have the vast majority of those hourly employees, and then we have a few scattered out throughout the rest of the organization.
Let me ask you a question about the compression. You said the minimum that the permanent employee starts at $17.52.
Correct.
Do they get raised every year or no?
Yes, that would be adjusted depending on the collective bargaining agreement that they fall within. So that would be the AFSCME rate there. So that would be annually adjusted per our collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME.
Then, if we done this eventually in like 2 to 3 years, the people who start 17, they will be young, because we're not doing 15 right away. If this happens, then it's going to be a gap between those and those. They never will be the same. because now we're adjusting it. If we say we're going to lay this along 3 years, maybe 12 next year, and after that 13 and a half or 14, and after that we have. At the same time, the 1752, they also will increase. By the time they will be 15, the 17 will be maybe, I don't know how much.
Yeah.
But it will be really different. They are not going to.
Yeah, they do grow. They're going to grow at different paces, though. So the jump from 11 to 15 percentage-wise is drastically more than the, I believe, 2% agreement that we've come to with ASME for the next couple of years. So that's what their adjustments will be. When you're talking $11 to $15 an hour or 12 to 15, even if it's over a couple period, it's just that percentage is so much bigger that it will compress a little bit. It's not going to be necessarily that you see an hourly start to exceed a permanent, but if there was this much gap before, there might be this much gap after, and we just have to consider what the implications.
Also think about it. The hourly, the permanent, they get benefit.
Correct.
Whether they are part-time or full-time, they get benefit, but the hourly, they don't get any kind of benefit. It is really win-win for both of them. This is not like something, I think. And also, I know that he said approximately 900,000 to 1 million after when it get to 15, like within 3 years from now. But yes, the number is scary, but think about it if you calculate it. I calculated, I find out the average is 2,400 per one employee. That means if we calculate like per month per year, this is only like $200 a month for one employee. This is really not too much money for the city to provide. It will be huge for the worker, but nothing for the city. I know that 1 million sounds increase, but just calculate it. It's not that much for each employee. And when you compare like 2,400 to the hourly wage every year, then the permit, it will be a huge difference.
Jeff, I have a question about the following sentence from Simon's memo. It says, I believe it's the fourth paragraph on the August 2nd memo, IP4 of the info packet. It says, to increase all hourly wage earners to at least $15 an hour while maintaining separation in wage scales would cost approximately $900,000 to $1 million annually. And I want to focus in on while maintaining separation in wage scales. Of the employees under $15 an hour, how many of them are represented by collective bargaining units? Do you know that information? Any?
Say that again. Of the employees
under $15 per hour?
None.
None. Okay. So has in terms what requires separation in wage scales? Is that our own policy? So, for example, I can understand as a practical matter, while a worker could look at it two different ways. The person making $15 an hour and 1 cent could celebrate the fact that his fellow workers are getting up closer to where they are and welcome them. Or they could say, I'm entitled to even more, and I understand that that's a practical reality. But is that required by ordinance or statute, or have we broken it down? How much would it cost if we didn't have to maintain separation in wage scales, if that were the case?
Well, if you just put everybody at 15, I think you're going to have a hard time filling some of those positions. I mean, the scales at the hourly are put in place to one, they hopefully reflect the marketplace. That's what other cities or other similar jobs in the community are paying for that type of work. But you're going to have situations in which people have vastly different job duties that are paid the same that probably shouldn't be paid the same.
But do we at least have the number, though, in terms of what that would cost?
If we just stripped out the compression, no, I don't have that number. Okay. But we could calculate that. I would advise that that's probably. I don't think that's a a good way to go about this. I think there's differences in these salaries for good reasons, whether it's because we have trouble recruiting in some of these lines or in some of these positions, so we have to increase the salary in order to make it more attractive for people to apply, or in some cases you have return hourly employees every year that come to you with experience, and so in order to keep those experienced seasonal workers, you pay them more the second year they're here or the third year they're here. There could be any number of different reasons to have those salaries scaled differently.
Has AFSCME weighed in on this at all? I don't know.
I think you'll probably hear from them at your formal meeting. Okay. I believe they intend to speak at public comment.
I was wondering about that as well. Yeah. So I have a question about the January 17, 2018 memo, Jeff, that you provided. And it was, I think, all the temporary employees within each of the departments, the number of employees, type of position, and the hourly wage for each of those. And I noticed that the hourly wage varies considerably between roughly $10 and roughly $14. Yeah. So, but I don't have any sense of, I didn't try to calculate this, how many employees are earning $11 an hour? How many are earning $13 an hour? How many are earning $12 an hour?
On page 12 of that memo,
yeah.
As you look at that, that's requested hourly wage information is the title of the memo. So the first department listed is police department, yeah. And the 4 represents the number of...
Yeah, I meant in aggregate. I didn't mean by department.
In aggregate? No, okay. We didn't present the data that way.
Yeah. And I was thinking it might be helpful, but I think about that also partly in relationship to Simon's memo recommending, I don't know, 10 whatever it is as a base wage. And it seems to me that virtually everyone's already paid above the base wage. So we're talking about a very small number of people that would see a small bump as a result of what's being recommended.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
One thing I'll throw into the conversation is I was looking kind of in a similar way, as I mentioned, with the council salaries to what other cities are doing. And I happened upon Madison's policy here, and they have a living wage ordinance. And effective January of 2019, the living wage rate will be $13.27 an hour.
For seasonal employees or temporary employees?
Right, so it covers city employees, including hourly workers. And it has some other aspects to it which made sense to me. I mean, I've been thinking about this and also looking at the Iowa Policy Project's living wage estimates. For example, Madison does not include high school employees under the ordinance. So, I mean, there are a number of nuances to Madison's, but it seemed to me it might be useful for us to have another option to the $15 an hour, kind of looking at what another Midwestern city, progressive, probably similar in terms of cost of living, has approached this. And it seemed, if for no other reason than to better understand how an alternative, kind of a middle ground, so to speak. In my mind, what's most troubling to me are the people employed temporarily who are earning $10 an hour. I really want to bring that up. And from going from $10.27 to $13.27 is quite a bit. And so anyway, it seemed like it might be useful and helpful to have an alternative way of thinking about this that is in fact in place in a city that I think is an interesting and useful reference for issues such as living wage.
Jeff, back to that January 17th memo with the departments listed. Now, except for the Parks and Rec, which delineates by year 1, 2, 3, 4 the difference in the salaries, some of the other departments, like the animal control assistant is 10, clerical assistant is 12. Are these differences within the departments based on, say, job descriptions, responsibilities, years of experience, or do you know why there are differences within a department?
I think when it comes to the hourly rates, the departments will set those based on what they feel they can recruit from. So if the city manager's office feels like we can get a quality management intern at $11 an hour, that's what we do. That's typically an undergraduate or a graduate student that's enrolled in school, and we felt that we've been able to attract very good candidates at that level. And I think the same would go as you work your way down that list here. That's frequently when we have conversations, when we start to struggle to recruit employees, that's when we start to adjust those wage rates up. But departments have some leeway to set that, and then the human resources staff will help them understand what other departments are doing with similar positions.
I'd like to follow up on John's question, or not his question, what he said about Madison with regard to high school students. And them being excluded, I guess, from...
Yeah, anyone under 18, basically.
Yeah, so I was wondering, I had a similar question, but sort of the threshold question is, are there any legal constraints on our ability to basically ask who are the people who are employed on a temporary basis? Are they... are some of them high school students? How many? Are some of them college students? How many? Are some of them parents with children? How many? Or are some of them heads of households? How many? And that kind of thing. Are there any legal constraints on our ability to ask those kinds of questions?
There would be on some questions.
Familial status.
Yeah, okay, so we'll find out when I ask a question, I guess. So, yeah, so... just as a person living around here for now 30 plus years, I've kind of always guessed that many of our seasonal employees are high school students, maybe from middle class families in Iowa City. I have no idea if that's true. That's kind of been my background assumption. So unless it's illegal to ask, I'd be curious what percentage of our temporary employees fit that category. And then I'm also thinking about heads of households who occupy temporary positions. See, I don't know if that's, and then if we could use those facts as to influence what we do.
That's a real slippery slope.
Okay, I wanted to know that.
We even have an age prohibition in our local human rights ordinance. So I just...
Okay.
Even if we didn't ask for names, if we just sort of had random data as far as heads of household age.
We make it voluntary, but...
Yeah, that wouldn't be very helpful. Okay, so I would kind of back off from that, but I want to ask one other follow-up question, and then others can, continue to chime in. Do we have information about how many of our temporary employees are, in a sense, permanent part-time employees? They work year after year after year, but they're hourly temporary employees.
But how?
when you say permanent, that has a different meaning for staff. Permanent staff are separate from hourly. There's really two distinctions. There's hourly and permanent. I know that's not really where you were going, but of the hourly, we do have people that repeat with us on multiple years, and you see that in the wage scales, for example, with the library. You get at 1.5 years, you get a bump. At 6 months, you get a bump. Same with Parks and Rec. So those areas, those two in particular, where you see a financial reward for coming back, that's probably where we get the most repeats. The ones that don't have those scales, those ones on the first page where there's interns and research assistants, those probably, in most cases, don't come back year after year. I can't say that with great certainty for any of them. There are a few that, for example, our front desk staff that you see here when you come in, they're listed under the city manager's office as a communications aide at $12 an hour. We've had some luck keeping a few of those positions for a year or two, but they generally turn over in time. So I can't give you that answer with certainty, but I would say Parks and Rec and Library, it's common that you'd have a group of them that come back year after year, or that are employed for more than a year.
Do you have I know that, I don't know if there is a way you can tell if somebody a household or not. That could be difficult from my point of view. But I know that there is a way you can tell how old is the people who work at their age group. Maybe like $15 from this age to 15 people from this age to this age. You can tell that from their age. Because I'm sure 100% I met myself some people who are singles parent who work at the rec center and they work somewhere else, seasonal employees in Iowa City. I know low-income students who work there, and their salary add to the household, and they receive Section 8. Their salary will determine how much they get help from Section 8. I know those people. Maybe there is a middle class too, but we don't have to talk about this really. We need, to talk about the importance of just, moving our society forward and set the example as a city. I understand that another city, they do something good, maybe than us, or maybe we do something good than them. We can take away from the city that they done very good things and just take that example. But when we do, we don't have to go with them if they are not doing the same thing. We should set the example, because if somebody brought this in their city, they're going to look at us and say, Iowa City is doing this, so we can do the same thing.
Yeah. Can I chime in here, Jim?
Sure.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Coupling with what Mazahir had said, I think our role is not necessarily to look to the past, but to identify what the future is, and to set an example, and to set a leadership role in terms of where we're going. I view $15 an hour as the new 40-hour work week, the new 8-hour day. When these proposals came through labor history, they were always seen as impossible. They were seen as impractical. There was a real cost associated with these labor improvements. And I think the same should be said of the $15 an hour work, or it's 15 per hour wage standard. I don't think it matters if they're the son of a wealthy person and they're working their way through college. It should not matter in terms of what we pay our lowest level or our lowest paid employee, because even though they're lower paid doesn't mean we don't value the contribution that they work. And in terms of where we go from here, I do think we need to have some flexibility sort of moving forward. So I would like to see us implement this over the course of 3 years. I think that would give us some of the financial flexibility. We have some growth projects here on into the future that I'm confident we will be able to pay for them. Obviously, if there's a sudden financial change in the future that we can't foresee, gives us a little bit of flexibility, but it sets us on the firm track to move forward with this. So I understand there's issues with wage compression, there is complexity associated with these, but there's always complexity with any labor advance, and I think that we should, rather than see only what everyone else is doing, we should provide the leadership role. This is a political issue around the country. I think we do need to plan for it. We do need to recognize it as a reality, rather than just sort of waiting and then all of a sudden being struck, X number of years down along the road, with a larger wage increase. It's just good planning on our part. And I think the final thing is that it's not really part of this particular topic, but I would like to see more full-time people in our park rec working on these. I think we have relied too much only on part-time, and I think this would assist us in making that transition. So that's sort of where I stand at this point.
And just to add to what Rockne said, I'm sorry if I'm taking a long time, just think about it. If suddenly the state decide to do it, in the near future, if we have good people who are going to decide $15 an hour is a minimum wage. What we're going to do as a city? Are we going to say, no, we don't have that? We get weak things sent out so we can live with it. Then let us do it. If we believe on it, why we wait for the registration to do it? Let's start, All of us, we believe on that. And we think that Des Moines or maybe even the Congress are not doing enough because they have to move the people for the minimum wage have to be $15 an hour. That, or all the research said that, or the data. Then, if we really believe on that, why are we waiting for them? If we have a power to change it, let's change it here from locally. And I think change starts locally. And that's why we have to do it, if we believe on it.
I'd just like to point out that we as a city aren't the ones that started this whole discussion about increasing the minimum wage. I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors for all the work and the effort that they did towards doing this. And they started the discussion. They got the ball rolling. They've even got businesses in the community continuing on with the increased wage. They've done studies with the Public Policy Department that it did not affect the businesses as people had said they would. As an organized labor person, I'm all in favor of paying an adequate wage. I would like to hear from, and it sounds like maybe we will hear from the organized labor folks maybe during our regular session to see their opinion on this as far as how they think it would affect their full-time employees, their union members as far as that wage. Because I would ultimately in favor of this, but phasing it in, just as the Board of Supervisors plan is. They've got a phased-in amount and just bumping it right up even over 2 to 3 years to even $15. I think you need to do a more of a phased-in approach as the Board of Supervisors have done it.
I would be very curious to hear from the City of Madison, to learn from the City of Madison about what they have done and why they chose to do things the way they did. Not that we are Madison, not that we should necessarily do what they are doing, but I think it would be instructive for us to have a sense of what at least one other sort of politically comparable city is doing. And I understand that this has been a major issue nationwide, and that progressive elements in the Democratic Party and so on have been advocating it big time for good reason. But I can plead ignorance as to whether, when people are advocating $15 an hour in other cities, whether they're talking about all employees regardless of employment status, or whether they're really referring to people who are earning, have full-time jobs, basically. And I don't know. I'm ignorant about that. I'd like to learn. So if somebody can, determine what's really being advocated in other cities, that would be helpful for me personally.
Then I really recommend that, we have like a council committee to search on that and bring more information to the council. I'm willing to be on that committee if somebody else will be.
I don't think we need to have a committee as such, but if you and another council member want to look into that more carefully, I think that'd be fine. I can't imagine any objection to that.
Yes, I'm volunteering because I'm really on favor
like
of this.
I could help you with that,
on
Maz.
Sure.
Okay, so Maz and Pauline will check into that a bit, okay?
Thanks.
Maybe I'll just chime in. Would that mean that if they ever talk to each other, would that be a quorum, or is it because it's not a formal committee hearing, they're fine? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Thanks, Rockne.
One thing I would like to know is there data known on how many university students currently work as temporary seasonable employees?
No.
Is there any way to collect that information at the moment?
Probably voluntary survey would be the only way to do that.
John, do you or Susan have anything any more you want to add to this?
No, I think there needs to be further exploration. I was pleased to see that Madison's living wage ordinance, based on our 1027 as a starting point, is a significant increase on the way to 15 an hour. You know, I mean, it's so I think there's an opportunity to move forward. How we define the endpoint, I think, is something worth looking at more carefully. But I was encouraged to see that in another Midwestern city, you know, they have the ordinance in place. You know, as Jim said, I just looked online, so it'd be interesting to get more background on that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we're going to get information, I would be interested in having more than just one other city, I mean, in terms of comparison. And just to clarify, Eleanor, with our human rights ordinance, we could not do a wage scale that was different for individuals under the age of 18, is that correct?
I don't think we could.
I don't think we could. Okay, thank you.
Would it be fruitful to, picking up on what you said, Susan, would it be fruitful to obtain information not just from Madison, but from a few other, pardon my expression, progressive college towns?
Big Ten would be fine with me.
Big Ten?
Yeah. Minnesota and Minneapolis, I think, maybe another. The city of Minneapolis is moving toward $15 an hour, with the $15 being reached in July of 2022. So that's another point of reference.
And I definitely want to know what our organized labor folks have to say, so if somebody's going to be speaking to us during the formal meeting, I'd like to hear what they say.
You could probably invite them to speak now. I don't know if they're prepared now, but if you want that input before you close this topic, you could.
Could you, Chris? You seem to be walking up, so I guess the answer is yes.
Just very briefly, my name is Christine Weinard. I am Vice President of AFSCME Local 183. AFSCME stands in support of this. Anytime that we're looking to pay an employee a livable wage, it's a win-win for the city. We're going to get more applicants. Those employees that, you know, that do come into our family stay with us longer, and you know, hopefully eventually become permanent employees. So AFSCME stands in support of this.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, it sounds to me like we want some more information. Oh, sure, please do. Come on.
I'm Terry Byers, and I'm president of AFSCME Local 183, and I will add to Chris that I do support this measure. I also would like to see more permanent jobs be created within the city. I think that if you look at that, if you look at our contract, we do address hourly employees. Make sure that our contract is enforced the way that it's written. I think that would benefit everybody. And most of all, when you do your advocacy for your people in Des Moines, please bring back Chapter 20 and collective bargaining, because that is the most important thing that my union needs, and because everything changes in 3 years if we don't get that changed. So it's a big chalkboard with a big question mark on it if we don't get that change back. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, I hear a substantial amount of support for increasing the wage, but we want other information about how much and whether there, I don't know, there are some folks we want to include or not, and whether we can legally do that. And so if you all could follow up on some of those key questions. Sure,
I'll just clarify a couple of things. The research on the Big Ten cities, is that a staff research assignment, and yes, work with Pauline and Maz to vet that before bringing it to council? I'm trying to figure out what staff's role is versus the council committee that you just talked about.
For me, I really meant, to come and regularly ask you what, to show me what that you get, and also reach out to other people who what their things, and also the county, and just bring more information to convince the council this is the right things to do.
Yeah, let me follow up a little bit, because my understanding was that Maz and Pauline would look into the question of what other sort of progressive political organizers around the country are doing, whether they're promoting $15 an hour for all employees or just for full-time employees. Right? I mean, that's the way I understood the question. Whereas the other one had to do with, the one having to do with Big Ten cities and maybe Minneapolis, was about what those city governments have done.
Okay.
Is that consistent with what y'all heard?
Yep. And then this is going to take some time to compile this and come back, and obviously you've got to deliberate over it. My biggest concern right now is budget planning for next fiscal year. I don't want to get into a situation in January where staff and council are misaligned and we've got a couple $100,000 that we need to, a gap that we need to fill essentially. So I would like, especially if there's consensus to phase this in, my suggestion would be that you pick a target for year one, whether that's 11, 12, 13, whatever you want to set that target at, and let us begin our planning with that known as the first step, and then let this research inform your step 2 and step 3 if you're looking at a 3-year window.
Tonight?
Doesn't have to be tonight, but probably within the next 30 days. We're going to have a budget discussion at our next meeting, right? Next meeting. 2 weeks from now.
Let's say the next meeting.
If you could try to think about that year 1 target, that's going to help us out tremendously in our planning.
Okay. Let me finish typing a note here. Okay, is there anything else anybody wants to say about this topic?
Oh.
All right, thank you. Moving on. Our next topic is to review the purpose statement for the Social Justice and Racial Equity Grant Program.
You have a memo from Stephanie Bowers in your packet. This was one holdover item from a previous work session. And I guess the quick background is here. The City Council has tripled the funding for this grant program. It's going to go from $25,000 to $75,000. The Human Rights Commission is going to start to plan for the award. That applications are gathered late in the fall, and then the awards are made in the early winter. And because there's a substantial increase in funding, we just want to make sure that you are comfortable with the purpose statement. We're not suggesting there needs to be change, but because there is a significant amount of funding being added to this program, I think it's a good idea that you look at that and you make sure it's reflective of what you want to see as that program grows.
Yeah. Let me start the discussion with a couple of questions and maybe an observation. First question is, I didn't realize that for-profit organizations were currently included, and I'm wondering why that is. I don't know if anybody, Stephanie, can you answer that question?
Well, the commission had several work sessions when the grant was created, and I believe that was something that they added, that it could be for-profit or non-profit.
There might be very good reasons. I'm not trying to criticize, but
I think just in general, what you're looking at is a commission that had something new placed in front of it and not really wanting to place restrictions because they didn't really know what they were going to get or what things would be asked to be funded. So I think they were just trying to be very broad in the first few years to get a better idea of the types of applications that were submitted.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can anybody think of for-profit organizations that do this kind of work? I mean, they're probably obvious, but they're not coming to my mind right at the moment.
The only thing that I would think of is I know in the last couple of years I've gone to a lot of good things down at Merge on minority entrepreneurship. Now, maybe this would be in another area that we should focus on, whether it's Economic Development Committee or something along those lines. But I think for, encouraging small business entrepreneurship, those are for-profit. And that would come to mind as something that the Human Rights Commission may want to address in terms of opportunity for underserved communities that haven't participated as much as we'd like in entrepreneurship.
Well,
even, I'm sorry.
I would say even an organization like Prelude, they're a for-profit organization, is my understanding, right, Jeff?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Pretty sure they are. I mean, I'm just thinking of organizations even like that, and I can double check, that may be doing a lot of service type stuff in the community, but they may be seeing some lack, within the services that they're providing, whether it be, translation services or something else like that, that goes beyond the scope of what they're currently doing and might want to apply for something like this. So I like the idea that it actually is broad enough to give that opportunity, because I think what we have to keep in mind is just because something is organized legally as a for-profit entity doesn't mean that this is some rich, cash, wealthy organization that can just spend money in any way they want to spend. I mean, they can still be running a really tight ship in terms of what kinds of money they have and what kind of services they can provide. So I think this makes sense to keep it open for both.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious. I'm not pushing the idea of getting rid of for-profit organizations. But when I think about this particular grant program, I'll tell you what I was envisioning when we were first talking about it. I was thinking in terms of our African American community, our Hispanic community, our Congolese community, our Sudanese community, and perhaps other communities that are part of Iowa City as a whole but have unique experiences. I was thinking about them. So so over the past few days I've been asking myself, okay, now in conversations with Congolese residents, what have I heard? Likewise with the other groups that I just mentioned. So with regard to several of them, what I hear is adults need to learn how to speak English more competently so that they can get good jobs, etc. So helping adults learn English, it sounds to me like a good part of a purpose statement. And then I think about our African American community, and that makes me recall the meeting that Pauline and I had with several black parents. And what we heard from them is that black youth need a safe place to learn and, in a sense, play, be themselves, and with some black leadership so that they see people who look like them in positions of responsibility. So I think, well, maybe that would fit well within this general purpose statement. So providing constructive activities for youth in their communities. When I first met with Congolese residents, the first thing I heard was, can the city help us organize some kind of community event so that we Congolese can get to know one another? Because Congo is a pretty good place, pretty big place, right? So helping them strengthen their own internal sense of community seems to me like a good purpose as well. And then the communities I just mentioned, in many cases, have their own unique cultures. They find themselves in this city, which is quite different from where from their countries of origin. But they also have, can share their unique cultures with us, with the larger community. So there, I think about an event that took place last spring, I think a UNA event, but I'm not United Nations Association event. But one of the things that happened was that, I don't know, 7 or 8 Congolese residents sang to us, and I thought, wow, that is gorgeous, the song that they sang. I would love to hear that, as part of community events. So helping them share their cultures with our larger community seems like a good part of a purpose statement. So, and then helping people, the kind of people I've just described, have access to good jobs, help them find ways to get around town, to get to places they need to go, and helping them navigate the criminal justice and healthcare systems, which are incredibly complicated for a newcomer to a culture. I've lived that, incidentally, in southern France, so I have an experience of how hard that can be. But when I put them all together, these are the kinds of things that come to my mind with regard to what I'd like to see this social justice and racial equity grant program foster.
That I guess to me, Jim, as I listen to those examples, I see all of those fitting under the current purpose statement. I mean, you talk about helping adults who are not, for whom English is not their first language, learning English. I mean, education is one of the 6 priority service areas. You talked about, for African American youth, a positive, place to congregate and things. I mean, part of that's education, part of that's building community. The other one with the Congolese, that's building community. Employment, learning the English skills for better employment. I actually think the current purpose statement is very good. I think it's broad enough. It may be more of an effort in terms of reaching out to various people, communities, organizations, within Iowa City, one, to make them more aware of this, and as they talk about things they would like to do, saying, hey, you should apply for a grant under this. I mean, we've met with people about the English learner situation, and there's people working on that right now. But what I don't want to see us do is make this purpose statement be so specific that it tends to exclude creativity and opportunities for people from all kinds of diverse areas. The one group that you did not mention that I think is really important, that should be included in this, or at least should think of themselves as being included and should then be thinking about grant proposals, are also the elderly and the disabled.
Right.
Because many times within those populations, economics are a huge issue. Right. And so for them to apply for grants for various kinds of programming that might help them, I think.
I would agree. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, William.
No, I was just going to say that's a very good point on Susan. I'm not sure how you'd include that in the 6 priority service areas as far as for the disabled folks.
I don't. I think when you talk about building community,
that's true.
You're talking about housing. You're talking about employment.
Mm-hmm. That's the seniors and the disabled. Also.
Yeah, those. I think building community oftentimes can apply to seniors because they get isolated in their own houses if they don't have transportation.
For sure.
Very good.
So I think those 4 key areas are excellent. I think they're broad enough for people to write lots of different kinds of grant applications that really, can target a certain segment for that particular year or 2 years to really get some programming going. I think you've provided some great specific ideas, Jim, but I do like the more general language of the current.
I wonder. Oh, I'm sorry, Maz, go ahead.
I just want to say, all of this information are great, and that, as you said, the wording is there for building community, for whatever Jim said is included. You think that is already included there. Mm-hmm. That's maybe for you or for the council or maybe for the audience, but not for immigrant. They are not going to understand building community means I can come and apply for grant to have my event, like cultural event at the Bed Mall, or to do something so I can tell this community what my culture is, so I can share my culture so people can better understand each other. You know, I think we need both. We need the same wordage.
Examples.
And put examples such as this and this, because I've been here, I know that my community, the Sudanese community, they're trying to do like a big event called like, I guess, you know, those kind of events like the So Festival. They would try to do Sudanese festival, but they couldn't because they don't have money and they have no idea. And I don't have idea. This grant could have, as a Center for Worker Justice, we apply for this grant, but I have no idea this could cover immigrants and communities, and you can do that. That's why it have to be either like examples, what like Jim mentioned, or people have to reach out to communities and tell them, hey, we have this. If you need this, just come and do that. Yeah, but you know, we need this kind of things.
I think the education part of it is very important, get the word out. And one of the things also that came out of Jim's and my meeting with those folks was that they don't know how to write grants, but I was glad to see, and I didn't realize that, and Stephanie can maybe allude to this somewhere in the memo from her, it talked about, I think in October or prior to the grant application, you have a public meeting, open meeting for folks to learn about the grants, how to write them, and what they can be used for. Is that correct?
Yeah, we plan on holding that in mid-November, and it will be voluntary, but just trying to get the word out to communities.
Where are you holding it, Stephanie?
Where?
Where?
I believe I reserved council chambers.
Okay. Okay, you know, I don't think this is going to help the community, like Sudanese community and Congolese community. Go to them. Go to the neighborhood center, hold something there. And go to the Congolese, they have, I guess they have also association. You go there and tell them, hey, that's what we do. Because usually low-income people, they don't come to the city hall and do that, you know, because maybe the timing is not good or the transportation. They have a lot of barriers, and also maybe the translation. Over there, they will bring somebody to translate for them, and they will help you out. Yes, that's my suggestion, really.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I absolutely agree, Maz. But if we're talking about one event, you can't hold one event, at least I don't know how to do it, hold one event for several different communities in different locations. But maybe there's some way to be creative.
I mean, I think just getting out there and getting the word out, getting flyers in different languages, placing them in different communities, spaces, I don't think that would be a big...
Or even you don't need to do that. There is another way, like say for example, the Congolese, that because I know the Congolese and I know the Sudanese very well, I've been like engaging with the association here and here. You know, they're very organized, by the way, and they have board of, you know, of directors, they have association. Reach out to them by email, send them the information, say, we have this here, educate your, because if they want to come and apply for the grant, they are not going to come like as individual. They will come as association who want to help this event. So, you know, just reach out to them specifically by their email. And if you want me to help you, bring in emails for those communities, I will.
Yeah, that's
right. Rockne, you wanted to say something, right?
Two quick things. I think along those same lines, I think in terms of council members getting the word out as well, I think we would be willing to do that. I know I would, and probably everyone would be willing to do that. Second big thing is, I know the deadline, we could publicize that as early as possible. I know you guys always do that, but I think we all need to think about where that deadline is and to get that out. When is the deadline going to be for applications, or how will that work?
The deadline would be January 2nd of 2019.
Okay. And will that be for the whole following year then? For
those, it would be for FY19.
Okay.
That answers your question, yeah. So.
And they receive the grant during summer, right? Spring, right?
Spring, summer, yeah.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm persuaded that we don't need to advocate changes in the language of the purpose statement. But I'm thinking it might be very helpful for the commission if we could just provide them with the transcript of our discussion because that way they'll have a sense of what was on our minds and what we were thinking was most, you know, some of the most important things?
I usually share the work sessions with them when this item's talked about, so I had told them I would, so it will get sent out to them later this week.
But I do mean the transcript. I don't mean the abbreviated minutes to the transcript.
No, I mean, I give them the link on City Channel 4 to view it, and then we discuss it at the meeting in more detail. But we can certainly supplement it with the transcript, but they actually get the video link.
Okay.
That's great.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Anything else on this topic?
Nope.
All right. Let's see. Next topic, clarification of agenda items. Yeah, we have a meeting tonight, don't we? A formal meeting. Does anybody need clarification about any agenda item?
I would like to pull out item 2D9, Housing Trust Fund contribution from the consent agenda.
All right, hold on. Item 2D9.
Do we need a second on that to get that pulled, Eleanor?
No.
Okay.
And can I move? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't need a second.
And I also would like to talk about item 2E2.
You want that considered separately too?
No, no, no.
Oh, you just
That's because I was trying to bullet, but you know, I just figured I talked to Jim. I talked to the city manager, and he told me that they have another meeting afterward, and they come to an agreement. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this deals with the potential annexation of Sunrise Mobile Home Park on Scott Boulevard. You have a 2E2 in your packet, is a email that you all were copied on with some concerns from their engineering consultant about a roadway that we have discussed with them that would go through the mobile home park. We are continuing to talk about that at the staff level. We think that there is an alternative to a roadway going through there that can meet most of our city objectives, not all of them. I don't know that we've communicated that back to the Sunrise Village owners and consultants, so I hesitate to say too much because I don't know how they'll receive that, but we think that there's good dialogue continuing, and by the time it gets to P&Z and ultimately to your desk, we hope that there's support from both Sunrise and staff on the resolution that we're seeking. Yeah, I think you all understand in reading her memo that there's a balance here between not wanting to displace or lose affordable housing units and yet providing good connected neighborhoods, and that's really what staff and Sunrise are working through right now. These are pretty typical discussions. It's not very typical that council gets copied on this correspondence, but believe me, anytime there's a development, or in this case an annexation, there is a lot of back and forth discussions with these developers, so I don't characterize this as anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I guess that's great. I just was worried because of the 11 residents that they will be displaced, but I'm glad to hear you guys get to resolve that. Also, I would like to talk about item 2E9. I don't want to bullet, but I want to say, like, really, I'm pleased to see that we have, the proposal revision to the ordinance 88 from the CBRB. And I guess it gives the CBRB better credibility with the community. That's why, hopefully, we're going to see this, like, putting on the work session very soon.
Well, I think this is a good time to get some council direction on that. You have the recommendations from CPRB. I think the next logical step would be for us as staff to give you our thoughts on those recommendations, primarily from City Attorney's Office and Police Department. And then you can decide whether you want to move forward with a work session, or maybe you'll be just, in reading our memo, comfortable directing us to draft ordinance changes. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Any other items? All right, hearing none, let's go to the first information packet. That's July the 19th. I'd like to say a quick word about IP number 4, which provides an update on possible citywide transfer of development rights for historic preservation. And I just want to sort of drop this idea out into everybody's lap. I would be potentially interested in a density transfer to South Johnson and South Van Buren, that area, if the transfer was part of some kind of urban design plan for the area. And Jeff, you and I have talked about this off and on in terms of that particular neighborhood and how it could be improved. If we could link the two, that would be pretty attractive from my point of view. And I know we'll have to discuss this a lot more thoroughly and maybe disregard what I just said, but at the moment I'm pretty attracted to that possibility.
I am too, and that is an area that's already been identified as a redevelopment area. I don't know how long it's been designated as a redevelopment area, but it's acknowledged to be something that we should be changing, redeveloping. And it looks to be a fairly large area to me, at least in the Central District Plan. I just tried to roughly calculate the area, and it came in at 44 acres. So that would include the street right-of-ways, but a fairly large area.
I'm just wondering, what would redevelopment or like a density transfer look like, since it's an area that's very heavily dominated by students? I want to say the last neighborhood map is like 86% rentals. I lived there last year, so I'm wondering just what would that kind of redevelopment look like?
Don't know.
No.
I mean, that's pretty, from my point of view, that's pretty much why I'm saying it would have to be, this density transfer to that particular area would have to be part of some kind of urban design plan for the area.
And I wonder, what does density transfer mean exactly?
It would be, in this case, taking potential development opportunities that take place where there's a historic property. So a property owner would designate a property as a local landmark, and thus give up the ability to develop it at a higher density, and you would take what they gave up there and move it over to another property. So if you were only, in really simple terms, if you were only allowed to build a 3-story building through a density transfer, you might be able to build a 6-story building.
So kind of like what happened with Tate Arms?
Correct. Exactly what happened with Tate Arms. That was a development transfer there.
Okay, anything else on the July 19th packet?
So just to let you know, if you didn't notice your pending work session topics list, we have scheduled a work session on the TDR ordinance. We want to make sure that council is on board with the direction that we are going before we get too far, because we have a self-imposed deadline of, I believe, late January to get this ordinance in place.
Moving on to July the 26th. We may not be able to get through this.
Oh, IP5, the KXIC, Kelly, I'm sure would.
Yeah, but let's do that, and then we'll probably have to stop. I'd like to volunteer for August the 29th. I cannot do, I'm due, but I cannot do the next 4. And you're scheduled for the next one, I guess. No, you already did. You did it last week, didn't you?
Radio show.
I can do the 22nd of August.
I can do
all the time.
September 5th.
Who's the dates?
I was looking at October 3rd. And is someone doing August 29th?
Jim.
I am.
Oh,
I just volunteered for that. And
Pauline, you're doing the 22nd?
22nd, correct.
So we don't have anybody for tomorrow, right?
No, not yet.
Yeah, so
I can do tomorrow.
Oh, you just did last week?
No, I didn't.
She didn't.
No.
So I don't know, did I switch with somebody?
No, nobody
I missed
did.
it then, because
Nobody
I was
did.
out of town.
That's all right, happens. You want
don't think
to
anyone
do
did.
tomorrow then, Susan?
Yeah, I'll do tomorrow.
Okay.
All right.
Jerry wasn't there anyway.
Can somebody do the 15th?
I can do the 15th.
Mazzy here, the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mazza here on the 15th. All righty.
What do we have left?
September dates.
I can do the 12th of September, if that's still open.
It is.
How about October 3rd? Is that taken?
John took October 3rd.
October 10th?
Nope. It's open, Rockne.
I'll take it.
I can do October 17th.
Well, sorry, I think I just missed one. Rockne, did you just say you'd do?
October 10th.
Who's doing September 5th? Is there?
That's me.
Rockne. I can do September the 26th.
And we have September 19th, October 24th, and October 31st.
I've done it twice.
I'll take the 24th of October.
One was going to be the one with John.
Do we want to leave one for
Staff?
Yeah. Sure, give them Halloween.
October 31st and September 19th.
So what happened to October the 3rd? Did somebody take that?
John.
That's me.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So September the 19th, and well, can anybody volunteer for September the 19th? Maz, can you do that one?
Well,
Mazza
I could do the
Yes.
31st, I guess. I try to spread them out a little bit.
Okay, I can do the 19th.
Okay, and John, you just volunteered for October the 31st?
31st.
All right, so there, I think we have a full schedule, and you can maybe share it with us, and if somebody's got a problem, you can let us, they can let you know. All right, we're going to have to stop there, so let's come back to, after the formal meeting, come back to the July 26th packet.
Sure.
Yeah, of October